Wanted to start actually by asking you all to introduce yourselves, your name, your role, if it's possible to do that in the chat, and a quick guess. What percentage of charities in the UK do you think are classified as micro or small? So that's 100k turnover or less annually. Have a guess. Pop it in the chat just as we're waiting for people to join as well. So the answer is actually, well, our last almanac, which looks back at kind of years past, I think it was between 83 and 85%. So those of you who are in the 80s, it's a lot. And how many charities are we in the UK? Over 168,000, I think. So it depends on how you count, and not all organisations are necessarily registered. We've got mutual aid groups and so on. So the amazing thing is in all of this is that we have made big impact over this time. And over the last few months, I've been speaking with a number of micro and small organisations and getting really inspired about the impact that their work has made. So I'd really like to share some of that inspiration with you, but I'd also like to open it up so that we get a chance to learn from one another. So I'm going to try and balance the time we have until 11:30 with a bit of me and a lot of you. So I think everyone knows how to do the Zoom thing, but we're not taking any breaks. We've only got an hour, so we're going to power through. And my Twitter handle, as you saw before, is Shehnaaz, at Shehnaaz CES, which is what you can use if you'd like. So I'll look at the chat occasionally, but if you've got a burning question, please just raise your hand, or if I'm not watching you, just unmute and say something. Okay. So what are we here to think about today? We are looking at the big impact that micro and small organisations make. We've just heard amazingly from Jude about the awesome stories that are collected, and I'd love us to discover together creative, organic, formal and informal ways to gather data. We've got to keep it going. We are making a difference, and we want to make sure that we communicate that, capture it, learn from it, and shout about it, right? Get round the table with people who need to know and need to fund us so that we can carry on. So I'd love you to ask questions along the way. I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that in some breakout rooms in a few moments. Before I do that, and as Philippa's preparing to pop us into groups, we can be kind of groups of, 3 or 4 is fine, depending on the numbers that we have in the room. I'd just like to draw your attention to a blog that I recently wrote. The link is there and I can pop it in the chat later, which was the culmination of the chats that I've been having with these micro and small organisations over the last few months. And we are part, NCVO are part of the Inspiring Impact Partnership. And I know Catherine's on the bill for later on today. So you can go and find all these inspiring conversations as case studies and podcasts and top tips on the Inspiring Impact website. So again, I'll drop the link in. But my blog was really to round up some of the key things that came from those conversations. And I'm simply going to mention the 4 areas of inspiration that came to me as I was speaking to people. Let's forget about perfection. This is not happening. It doesn't happen in the best of times, let alone in the times that we're in currently. And so it's about being good enough in the work that we do in terms of monitoring and evaluation. And I'm going to help us to think about the decisions that we need to make to be good enough. Perfection is not going to happen. What's most important is to capture what you think people need to hear. And of course, you've got accountability that you need to bear in mind, but it's about being proportionate. And I work alongside people like yourselves in charities, as well as with funders, to say, please ask the questions for which you really know you're going to use the information. And let's make sure we do that within our own organizations as well. The second inspiration for me was about relationships, and we've mentioned that. Jude highlighted that as well. It's such a relational thing doing our work, and data collection is about relationships too. The tricky part now is building rapport. Some people actually come alive online more than they might have done in person. For others, it's actually very excluding. So how do we find alternative ways to capture information and really try and build that rapport as best we can? I think another thing is that creativity is key. I've talked to lots of organisations that have said, you know, we've had a plan A, B, C, D for how we can get information, and trying to think of different ways to get people to comment. It doesn't have to feel like monitoring. It doesn't have to feel like you're putting people on the spot to extract data from them. It can be something that is creative, integrated, organic in a conversation, you know, listening to people, giving time for free talk and just picking up ideas there and then. And then finally, my inspiration from those conversations was about building a case for support. So yes, we're getting emergency funding, or we did, you know, early on. And yes, there's kind of short-term funding available, but we know we're going to have to continue to build the evidence base that says, you know, now here's a new set of needs for an existing group of people, or here's a new bunch of people that have come to us because everything else was closed. We are now their go-to, and these are their needs. And please, we need to get some funding and some resources for that. So you're in a position to build those cases of support for support as well. So those are my key takeaways that you'll find in the blog and that you'll see running through as a kind of golden thread throughout all the stories that I've had the pleasure of listening to. And I'd love your reflections on that in a few moments. But first, I'd love you to get into some groups and do some talking to each other. I think one thing we miss at having a live face-to-face experience is actually just getting the time to chat. So I'm going to send you off, or Philippa will, in a very short time, to do a little bit of work, to think through a couple of things. What the first question I'd like to ask us is, what decisions do you have to make that require data? So rather than having a scattergun approach, can we be a bit focused? And have to be laser focused. We're not going for precision or perfection, but what are the kinds of things that you need to make decisions about and for which you need data? And then secondly, what are the biggest challenges you're facing right now in the impact space? Okay. To support us to do this, I'm going to pop a link in the chat, which will take us to a bit of tech. Now, if this is going to disrupt anybody's concentration, then please don't worry. One of you in the group can be manager of this piece, and others can chat, and it's supposed to assist rather than restrict your discussion. So I'm popping in here a jam board. Hands up if you've come across one of these. Just give me a thumbs up if you know what a Jamboard is. Yeah, some of you, and some not. All right, well, those of you who are new to it, all you need to do is cut this link, pick it up, or click on it, and it should open in a separate tab on your browser. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in screen share. It's already an anonymous tool. It is Google. I mean, kind of Google's running the world right now, along with other big giants. But I find it a really helpful tool to get anonymous feedback, and I'll show you how it works. So every time someone arrives, it gives you an identity. So we've got some beavers and some dinosaurs and all sorts of people joining, which is great. So all of you have been anonymized. And then I've put the questions in here. You'll see that you can duplicate boards across the top. And all you need to do is pick up a sticky note and write down whatever it is, save it, and it appears on the board. So have a little try right now. You can edit that. You can change its color. And actually we can move one another's post-it notes around. So when we do this piece of group work, I can come and see what people are putting up there. and I can save this Jamboard afterwards and circulate it round. So we'll have a collective space. So is the link working? Yes, brilliant. So people are able to populate that. So when you get into your group, please just have this conversation about decisions and challenges. Populate it on these first 2 boards, the arrows at the top, advance. The next 2 boards are for later, so you won't want to go there. You're simply going into these 2 spaces. Okay, so at least one of you in the group hopefully can have access to this, and the rest of you can chat. So I'd like us to go off for about, I think about 10 minutes, if that's okay, to get people in to little groups. So when you've gone in, have a little chat, and then we'll come back and see what we've got. Thank you so much for all the points that you've made on the Jamboards, and I am going to try and go through all of them in kind of thematic order, as it were. So a repeating point that came up is about accessibility. So we have got to embrace the technological world that we perhaps had ventured into a little bit, but we've got to embrace it much, much more. So a couple of things there. People who don't have access to technology, one of the 2 things I'm going to say about that. One is that I know of charities who are out there to support us with that challenge of accessibility, and also funding. Okay, so make a note if you need access to people who know how to do this stuff in a techie way, or that can fund you. I've talked to charities where one of the things they asked for was Wi-Fi boosters or more data on the phone or whatever it might be. So where can we go and get more support so that people who want to access through technology can do that? The second thing in terms of technology is that if people are averse or don't wish to, or cannot rather access, then we need to be creative and bring back some of the traditional ways of collecting data. So making phone calls, putting out paper forms when we do get to visit people in a safe and physically distant way. Okay, making phone calls when people are out on their walk, as long as that's not going to interrupt their self-care, or having physically distanced walks and having a chat, which in and of itself is a great thing to do. And therein might be some questions around how are they finding things, what needs have they got, how are they experiencing the service you're providing. So we've got to be creative. Maybe we can help to help with the digital world. Maybe we can get some funding for that, or maybe we have to use some more traditional ways of gathering data. The point about the length of time to build the relationship, again, I've said some people come alive online actually, and I've been listening to people who've talked about, and researchers who've talked about, those who are introverted by nature, the online world is actually more accessible to them, or they feel more included that way than others may do. But we still do feed off one another's energy, and you don't get to see all the visual cues. So it is the case that we have to get people warmed up, do some fun things online perhaps, so that it doesn't become too much of a barrier, as long as people are able and willing to get involved. The suspicions about reasons for data gathering, I think, is important. Why are we gathering the data? Well, we should be answering that question anyway, and therefore people should know what we're going to do with it, how we're going to keep their data confidential, how they can keep safe if they need to. So safeguarding around data gathering and making sure that people are comfortable to interact, and giving them alternative ways, as indeed we have been given alternative ways today to just come in as a phone call if we don't want to come in as video. There was lots and lots and lots on this Jamboard, and I'm going to pick up a few of the things that were here. So who are we reporting to? Whether that's funders, whether that's board of trustees, whether that's the charity commission, whether that's to other stakeholders, audience need is something that we have to be really clear about. Who needs the data? Why do they need it? What do they need? What do they not need? Because we do tend to over collect information just because we always have done, and we think someone somewhere might want this. This is about really reviewing that and saying, actually, I'm going to ask my funder a couple of questions. And believe me, funders are now in that position of saying, we're actually going to overwhelm ourselves if we keep asking for loads of stuff. So they're really ready to hear what you've got to say. We'd like to tell you about XYZ. Is there anything else? Okay, so we've got to kind of get a bit more confident about this and a bit more comfortable with really asking funders that question. How will you be using this information? Could you tell me? Because then I'll get it for you. But if we could hold back on some of these other things, and also the frequency with which you want that data to be gathered. And similarly with our boards of trustees, again, what key performance indicators have they got? Why do they need to know this stuff? What's really important to know? And can I tell you, impact is not easy to measure. Yeah, outcomes much closer to our world, en route to impact. So that is still, you know, in service of the impact statement, if you like, but it's the outcomes data that I think we should all aspire to get really quite good at, because that's about making a difference to people's lives. And that's what we're all in this game to do, is to make a difference. So that will be based on our needs. And a few of you touched on the needs of our service users. What are they? How do we get that data? We need to know quickly what the needs of our users are. Now, if you haven't already got your ears to the ground, maybe you can partner with another organization that does. Maybe there are people in this room who already have evidence around young people into work or whatever. Maybe there's some research or even some grey literature. So, you know, stuff that you can find from a reputable source that tells you about, you know, what it takes to get young people to be confident to enter the workplace. Yeah. So you don't have to do all this evidence creation yourself. Access some things out there that you could cite as evidence. However, if you are ears to the ground and you have actually heard these, you are building the evidence base. So please share that. Please go and knock on some doors and say, you need to know this about the local community. Again, I can't tell you how many organizations I've spoken to that say, we've got a gold mine of data now. We know so much more than we imagined about the communities that we're serving. We need a seat at the table. And so policymakers, decision makers, influencers, they're ready, they are ready. And if they're not, you have to keep kind of knocking to go, we've got stuff to tell you. Blog about it. I know these things take time to blog, to podcast. I challenged myself, never done a podcast before, but I challenged myself in this time to find out how to do this fairly cost effectively and time efficiently. It wasn't easy, and we got a few podcasts out there. So go on the Inspiring Impact website, but there are people out there that can help. There's free transcription services out there as well, that when you've recorded a podcast, it can do the transcription, so you're not excluding anyone that would have a hearing impairment from getting the information. Okay, so we can find creative ways to get the stories, to share the stories, and to find out needs from people. So I've said lots of stuff, and the big question is time to collect that data, the skills to do all the things I've talked about. Again, there's lots of skills that we could perhaps, or lots of mutual arrangements we could perhaps come to, and organizations out there like Jude from Sound Delivery, who just talked to us earlier, who are ready to get the stories. Inspiring Impact also, there's a little button, you can just tell your story and give your give your details, and then that can go out there. But finding the time for me is about being smart and integrating this into your everyday. Yeah, if we put it as another task on the list, it will just keep slipping down the list. So my question to you is, of all the data that you need, where can you nestle that into what you're already doing? You want to find out needs of people. You're already going to be checking in on them to say how they're doing. Listen out for the things that are new. Okay, that's you getting a sense of what the new needs are. You're not doing a formal big research project. We're not after perfection, and we are not academically inclined at this point. We are just trying to get the quick and easy data that we need for now. Then you might want to do some more in-depth conversations with people, and that will give you the qualitative, that will give you the stories, and it will take more time to analyze that. But that's the stuff that's going to demonstrate that the work you're doing is helping to make a difference. Those case studies over time will become your case for support, your deeper evidence. But you don't need to measure everything that moves. You don't need to talk to everybody every 5 minutes about how they're doing. You can do these sampling things, and you can really be clear on what you need to know and then go for it that way. Okay, I have talked a lot. Just wanted to scan the Jamboard and see what else there is, but also to show you a couple of things which I think kind of wrap this up, but I want to leave a few minutes then for questions. So I've just put this into a little set of top tips. Now, again, these top tips are available in long form, and I'm just giving you the headlines. Planning, even if it's rapid planning, everything's having to be done rapidly, but get a few people in the room, someone from the trustee board, someone from your funder group, staff, volunteers, whoever it is that are keen to make sure that we don't miss opportunities to gather information, and just make a Jamboard, have a little conversation, whatever you want to do, and say, what information do we need? What information do we really need? Okay, and it will be the case that there won't be, ultimately, when you do the prioritization, it won't be that many things. Okay, and the real need will have to emerge, and you will have to find some time to do it. Then I'd say find inspiring ways to gather information, whether we go digitally. So I've heard a few things now, and pop a few more in the chat. We've got Zoom polls, anonymous, quick, easy snapshot at the end of a chat. How's everyone doing? Was this useful? Are you feeling confident now to go and apply whatever we've learnt? Quick feedback. Something like Mentimeter. Again, a free version of that builds word clouds for you, makes lovely charts. Again, anonymous. So mentimeter.com is another kind of feedback gathering tool. And there are more. WhatsApp groups people have talked about, really easy to, again, you've got to be careful, but you can broadcast through WhatsApp. You don't always have to put a group together. A broadcast on WhatsApp is when you message, say, 50 people, but they don't know they've all been messaged with one another. They're not in a group. It's just you sending to all. It's kind of like blind copying on an email. Okay, so check out WhatsApp broadcasts. It is about relationships. It is about rapport building. And there are a number of ways perhaps to do that. Getting your beneficiaries to talk to one another, but again, making sure the safeguarding is in place. And we've talked then about making sure this is organic, and informal data collection is as valuable as formal, as long as it's done systematically and safely. Okay. Be inspired by your analysis. People are sharing with you new needs. They are feeding into what could then be an evidence base. And maybe you can then look across to some research that exists, the Office of National Statistics and other formal bodies that capture information, but also there is great literature out there as well that you could have a look at. And then use that information. If after doing the data collection, it all sits in some folder somewhere, electronic or otherwise, that was a big waste of time. So you want to use it. There's lots of lovely software around that can translate this into visual visuals, data visualization, infographics, and so on. And that information can be used then to make a case for support. Thank you so much for participating. And I've really enjoyed speaking with you all today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.